Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore one of history's most delicious ironies, a story steeped in aroma, paranoia, and power. Imagine the steam curling from a tiny porcelain cup, so small it fits in the palm of your hand. The air in the opulent, hushed rooms of a palace is thick with the rich, dark scent of freshly ground beans, a fragrance that has fueled empires and poetry for centuries. This is the world of the Ottoman Sultan. Of course, if this were the real late 19th century Ottoman court, you probably wouldn't survive the evening. A stray political opinion whispered over your sherbet could get you a one-way ticket to a very chilly island fortress. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I love to see where you're all tuning in from, so drop your city and the local time in the comments below. It's always oddly comforting to know we're all under the same digital sky. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story centers on a man who sat at the very heart of this coffee-soaked world, Sultan Abdul Hamid II. He was the ruler of a sprawling, fraying empire, the caliph of the Muslim world, and the master of a palace that contained, among its countless treasures, a collection of over 1,000 coffee pots. Imagine that, 1,000 vessels designed for a single purpose. Gleaming silver pots chased with intricate floral patterns, others of heavy brass, their spouts long and elegant like the neck of a swan. Some are porcelain from the finest European workshops, painted with tiny scenes of pastoral bliss, while others are solid gold, studded with gemstones that would catch the flickering candlelight of the palace. Each one is a work of art, a testament to the absolute centrality of coffee in Ottoman life. And here is the beautiful, quiet paradox that we'll be unwinding tonight. Sultan Abdul Hamid II, the man who owned 1,000 coffee pots, despised coffee. He didn't just dislike the taste, he feared it. He saw in every dark, steaming cup a potential vehicle for his own demise. For him, the rich aroma that his subjects cherished was the scent of treason. The simple act of sipping a morning coffee, a ritual for millions across his domain, was a moment of profound vulnerability he refused to endure. This wasn't just a casual aversion. It was a deep-seated phobia that would come to define his reign and the very architecture of his life. To understand his fear, you have to understand the drink's power. In the Ottoman Empire, coffee wasn't just a beverage, it was the bedrock of social and intellectual life. Coffee houses, or kavhane, were called makteb-i-irfan, schools of the wise. These were places where men gathered to discuss politics, art, and philosophy, to play backgammon and to listen to storytellers. They were the empire's newsrooms, social clubs, and public forums, all in one. The government knew this, of course. They monitored these establishments closely, knowing that the same coffee that fueled poetry could also fuel sedition. A popular uprising could be brewed just as easily as a pot of strong Turkish coffee. So the Sultan, surrounded by a culture obsessed with this drink, builds a fortress of paranoia around himself. His fear of being poisoned was legendary, and, to be fair, not entirely unfounded. Ottoman history is littered with sultans who met untimely ends. A poisoned cup was a classic, if somewhat cliché, method of political assassination. His own uncle, Sultan Abdul Aziz, had been deposed and died under extremely mysterious circumstances just before Abdul Hamid came to power, so you can't exactly blame the man for being a little jumpy. This fear manifested in the most elaborate daily rituals. While he refused to drink it, the coffee still had to be prepared for him, just in case. The process was a high-stakes piece of culinary theater. The coffee-making elaborations manifested in the most elaborate daily rituals. The Kavechi Bashi, or the chief coffee maker, was one of the most trusted officials in the palace hierarchy. This wasn't your local barista. This was a man whose hands were responsible for the Sultan's potential life or death every single day. The beans were ground in a sealed room, under guard. The water was from a specific, protected spring. Every step was watched, every ingredient scrutinized. Historians still argue whether Abdul Hamid's profound paranoia was a pre-existing personality trait or a perfectly logical response to the precarious throne he inherited. Was he a man slowly driven mad by power, or a shrewd political survivor who understood the game better than anyone? His solution was simple and absolute. He would drink nothing that others had prepared out of his sight. He drank water from his own sealed spring and milk from his personal cows, often milking them himself just to be sure. He ate simple foods like yogurt and boiled eggs that were difficult to tamper with. And so his magnificent collection of 1,000 coffee pots sat silent, gleaming in the treasury rooms of the palace. They were symbols of an imperial tradition he was a part of, but could never partake in. They were beautiful, empty vessels, much like the public ceremonies he was forced to endure. Each pot was a quiet monument to a single, paralyzing fear. A fear that was born long before he ever sat on the throne in the gilded, lonely cage of an Ottoman prince's childhood. That fear began here, in the quiet, sun-drenched rooms where you now find yourself. You are a young prince, a Shekhzadeh, and your home is the Topkapi Palace. But it is less a home and more of a beautiful, sprawling prison. From your window, you can see the Golden Horn shimmering, the cypress trees dotting the hills, and the distant, bustling skyline of Constantinople, a city humming with life that you can see and smell, but never truly touch. Your world is one of gilded cages, literally. The style of confinement you live in is known as the kafez, which simply means the cage. It's a much more comfortable upgrade from the old system, which involved your ambitious older brothers. Well, let's just say it involved a silk rope and a very permanent solution to sibling rivalry. Progress, I suppose. The kafez is designed to keep you and your many, many half-brothers and cousins safe, docile, and, most importantly, away from any armies you might get ideas about raising. You live in a luxurious suite of rooms decorated with the most breathtaking Iznik tiles, their blues and turquoises swirling in intricate floral patterns. The floors are cool marble under your soft leather slippers, and the air is scented with jasmine from the gardens and the salty tang of the Bosporus. You are served meals on delicate porcelain, and your clothes are made of the finest silks. It is a life of immense privilege and profound, unending boredom. Every day is almost exactly the same as the last. Your education is meticulous. Tutors arrive to teach you calligraphy, the elegant dance of the reed pen across the page. You study the Quran, Persian poetry, and Ottoman history, a version of history, anyway, that is heavily curated to be flattering to the current management. You are taught French, the language of modern diplomacy, and you become quite fluent. But your real education happens between the lines. It happens when you are in the presence of your father, the reigning Sultan Abdul-Majid I. The meetings are formal, brief, and terrifying. You learn to stand perfectly still, to keep your eyes downcast, to offer practiced empty pleasantries. You learn that to draw attention to yourself is to draw danger. The best prince is the forgotten prince. This is the second, more important lesson of the Cathes. Trust no one, especially family. Your brothers are your future rivals, your cousins the same. You see them during religious festivals or in carefully orchestrated gatherings in the gardens. The conversations are stilted, exercises in saying nothing of substance. You all smile, you inquire about each other's health, and you spend the entire time trying to read the true meaning behind each other's placid expressions. It's like a permanent, high-stakes family reunion where your weird uncle might actually have you exiled if you use the wrong fork. So, to escape the suffocating silence and the web of watchful eyes, you retreat into your own world. You find a strange comfort in things your hands can make, things that are solid and real and honest. You discover a love for carpentry. In a small workshop, tucked away from the main courts, you spend hours with saws, planes, and chisels. The crisp scent of fresh wood shavings becomes your favorite perfume. You learn to make small, intricate boxes, then cabinets, then beautifully inlaid tables. The focus required is a meditation. The grain of the wood doesn't lie. A joint either fits or it doesn't. There are no hidden motives in a piece of cherry wood. This is a fringe tidbit of history that's absolutely true. The future Caliph of Islam was a remarkably skilled amateur cabinet maker. It was his therapy. He also developed a fondness for Western opera, importing scores and librettos, losing himself in the high drama of Verdi and Donizetti, a world of passion and emotion that was utterly absent from his own muted existence. Historians still debate the psychological impact of the Cathes system. Did this gilded prison intentionally breed meek, controllable princes, or did it accidentally forge men of supreme cunning and deep-seated paranoia? You learn to be an expert observer of human nature because your survival depends on it. You notice the slight tremor in a vizier's hand as he accepts a cup of sherbet. You notice which of your brother's tutors are seen speaking quietly in the courtyard. You become a detective of silence and shadows, because that is the only world you are allowed to inhabit. Your mind, unable to roam the empire, instead roams the palace, mapping every loyalty, every grudge, every potential threat. You are not the first in line for the throne, not even close. Your older half-brother, Murad, is the heir apparent. He is charming, intelligent, and well-read. Everything you are not. You were seen as quiet, pious, and somewhat unremarkable. And you cultivate this perception. It is your armor. You watch as others plot and scheme, as they try to curry favor. You just keep to your prayer rugs and your carpentry workshop, making yourself as small and unthreatening as possible. You are playing the long game, learning the quiet, lonely lessons of survival. And in the back of your mind, a simple truth is hardening into a permanent belief. The world is a dangerous place, and the only person you can ever truly rely on is yourself. The man who will one day fear the coffee cup is being built here, one silent, watchful day at a time. The world outside your gilded cage finally shatters your quiet routine. History doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Your father, Sultan Abdul Mejid I, dies. His brother, your uncle Abdulaziz, takes the throne. Life in the Cafes continues, but the air grows thicker with tension. Your uncle is a man of grand ambitions and even grander spending habits. He builds lavish palaces, a new ironclad navy, and takes extravagant tours of Europe, all while the empire's finances crumble. The treasury is emptying, and the whispers in the coffee houses are growing louder. You, from your quiet workshop, listen to the distant echoes of discontent. You keep your head down, you keep carving your intricate wooden boxes, and you wait. Then, the unthinkable happens. A group of reformist ministers, led by the powerful Middat Pasha, decides that your uncle is a liability. In May of 1876, in a swift and nearly bloodless coup, they depose Sultan Abdulaziz. He is escorted back to the palace, a prisoner in the very rooms where he once ruled. Just a few days later, he is found dead. The official report says he took his own life with a small pair of scissors. It is an explanation that almost no one believes. The prevailing theory, one that you certainly hold, is that he was quietly and efficiently murdered. This is a mainstream historical fact that casts a long, dark shadow over everything that comes next. The throne, it seems, is not just a seat of power, but a death trap. Your older brother, Murad V, is now Sultan. He is brilliant, liberal, and everything the reformers wanted. He is meant to be the savior of the empire, the man who will bring in a constitution and a new era of enlightenment. There's just one problem. The events, the coup, the suspicious death of his uncle, the immense pressure, have completely shattered his mind. He descends into a state of severe mental breakdown, racked with paranoia and anxiety. He is unable to govern, unable to even appear in public. After just 93 days on the throne, the same ministers who elevated him have no choice but to depose him as well. And so, the spotlight, which you have so carefully avoided your entire life, swivels and finds you. You are Abdul Hamid II, and it's your turn. Suddenly, you are being led out of the Cafes, blinking in the unfamiliar glare of absolute authority. You are 34 years old. You are the 34th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. The feeling is not one of triumph. It is one of sheer, gut-wrenching terror. You have inherited a bankrupt state, a restive population, and a court teeming with ministers who have just overthrown 2 sultans in the space of 3 months. Your predecessors are a ghost and a madman. It is not exactly a vote of confidence in the company's leadership. You stand on the hallowed ground of the Ayub Sultan Mosque for your girding ceremony, the Ottoman equivalent of a coronation. Instead of a crown, you are girded with the sword of Osman, the founder of your dynasty. It is a moment of immense symbolic power. You are now the Caliph, the spiritual leader of the world's Sunni Muslims, and the Padishah, the emperor. But as the heavy sword is strapped to your waist, you are not thinking of glory. You are thinking of your uncle's supposed suicide. You are thinking of your brother's vacant, terrified eyes. You are looking at the faces of the smiling ministers around you, Midhat Pasha and the others, and you are wondering which one of them will be the first to betray you. You agree to their demands, of course. You have to. You proclaim the first ever Ottoman constitution, the Kanun-i Asasi, and you open the first Ottoman parliament. There are speeches about liberty, equality, and fraternity. The reformers are ecstatic. They believe they have found their man, a quiet, pliable ruler who will be a constitutional monarch. They have made a profound miscalculation. You see the Constitution not as a new beginning, but as a temporary inconvenience. You see the Parliament not as a partner in governance, but as a nest of vipers. This is where the quiet, watchful boy from the Kafes becomes the master strategist. You use the outbreak of a disastrous war with Russia as a pretext, citing emergency powers granted to you by the very constitution you proclaimed. You dissolve the parliament in 1878, less than 2 years after it opened. You send its architect, the powerful Midhat Pasha, into exile. Later, you'll have him tried for the murder of your uncle and condemned. You have effectively pulled off a counter-coup, silencing all your rivals and gathering every last thread of power into your own hands. It's a move of breathtaking audacity. Historians still argue whether this was your plan all along or if you were simply reacting to events. But the result is the same. You are now an absolute monarch. The brief Ottoman experiment with democracy is over. You are alone on the throne, just as you were alone in your workshop. And your profound sense of distrust for every single person around you is now the guiding principle of the entire Ottoman Empire. Now, with all the power of the empire consolidated in your hands, the mundane routines of the palace become fraught with danger. And no routine is more symbolic, more deeply woven into the fabric of Ottoman identity than the serving of coffee. It is a ceremony you must endure, a performance you must direct, even though the very sight of the dark liquid makes your stomach clench. Let's walk through this ritual, a daily piece of theater that you have redesigned entirely around your paranoia. It begins not in the kitchen, but in your private stores. The kahvejebashi, the chief coffee maker, a man you have selected for his unwavering, dog-like loyalty, is the only one with the key. The coffee beans, sourced from Yemen, are kept in sealed porcelain jars. He inspects the seal, then opens a jar in the presence of 2 armed guards. The beans are poured into a silver tray. They are not ground yet. That comes later. He personally examines the unroasted green beans one by one, looking for anything unusual. It's a tedious, painstaking process, but a necessary one. The beans are then taken to a small dedicated roasting room, which is also locked and guarded. The kahvejebashi roasts them himself over a charcoal brazier, turning them constantly until they are the color of dark chocolate, and the air is thick with their rich, nutty scent, a scent that brings pleasure to the whole palace, but only anxiety to you. Once roasted, the beans are cooled and then brought to another room, this one with marble tables and heavy brass mortars and pestles. Here, under the watchful eyes of the same guards, the beans are finally ground into a superfine powder, almost like cocoa. The rhythmic, percussive sound of the pestle hitting the beans echoes softly in the stone room. It's a sound that should be comforting, but to you, it's a countdown. Now comes the brewing. The water is drawn from the Hamadiyya spring, a source you had specially commissioned and protected, with its pipes leading directly into the palace. No other water will do. The freshly ground coffee, sugar, if requested, though you never would, and the pure water are measured into a sezve, a small, long-handled pot made of copper or brass. The kahvejibashi places the sezve on another brazier, this one filled with hot sand, which allows for a gentle, even heat. He watches it intently. The coffee must never come to a full rolling boil. It must just foam up to the rim before being pulled away from the heat. This is done 2 or 3 times, creating the thick, velvety crema on top that is the hallmark of a perfect Turkish coffee. Finally, the coffee is ready. It is poured into a tiny, handleless cup called a fincan, which rests inside a beautiful, ornate holder called a zarf. The zarf is often made of silver or gold, filigreed and sometimes studded with gems. It protects the fingers from the heat of the cup. The coffee, the zarf, a glass of your special water, and perhaps a small piece of Turkish delight are all arranged on a silver tray. And now begins the most perilous part of the journey. The tray is carried from the coffee kitchens to your private chambers by a procession. The kahvejibashi leads, followed by several other high-ranking servants. They walk in a slow, deliberate line through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. No one is allowed to approach them. No one is allowed to speak to them. They arrive at your door. They are announced. They enter. They bow low. The kahvejibashi approaches you, his eyes fixed on the floor. He presents the tray. You look at it. You see the rich, dark liquid, the creamy foam on top. You can smell the cardamom that was ground with the beans. It is a perfect cup of coffee. It is also, in your mind, a perfect cup of poison. You never, ever drink it. Sometimes you will dismiss it with a wave of your hand. The whole procession turns and leaves, and the coffee is ceremonially discarded. Other times, to test the loyalty of a visitor or a minister who happens to be with you, you will graciously offer them the cup. It is a moment of supreme tension. To refuse the Sultan's coffee is a grave insult. To accept it, well, who knows what's in it? The guest is forced to drink, smiling, while your dark, piercing eyes watch their every reaction. It's a little power game, a fringe tidbit of your daily life that reveals the depth of your mistrust. You have created an elaborate, foolproof system for preparing a drink you will never consume. It is a performance of power, a demonstration of control. The ceremony itself is the point. It shows that you are the Sultan and the world bends to your will, even in this small, personal way. Historians still argue about the true nature of this ritual. Was it a calculated act of political theater designed to keep everyone off balance? Or was it the genuine obsessive compulsion of a deeply fearful man? Perhaps it was both. Every single day, this silent play unfolds. The beans are inspected, roasted, ground. The coffee is brewed to perfection. The procession marches. The cup is presented. And you, the sultan of a coffee-loving empire, stare at the offering and feel nothing but a cold, bitter dread. The entire performance reinforces your core belief. Safety can only be found in solitude. The source of this daily ordeal, Topkapi Palace, becomes a place you can no longer tolerate. It is too full of ghosts, too steeped in a history of fratricide and betrayal. Remember the cafes, your childhood prison? The entire palace feels like a larger, more dangerous version of it. The sprawling courtyards and ancient chambers, which tourists now wander in awe, feel to you like a labyrinth of bad memories and potential ambush points. The palace is too open, too porous, nestled in the heart of the city. The whispers from the Istanbul coffee houses feel like they can drift right over the walls and into your ears. You need a sanctuary. You need a fortress. So you decide to build one. You turn your attention to a wooded, hilly area overlooking the Bosphorus, far from the bustling center of the old city. This is Yildiz, which means star in Turkish. It had been an imperial park, a place for picnics and hunting, dotted with a few small pavilions, or kushks. You decide to transform this peaceful parkland into the new nerve center of the Ottoman Empire, and more importantly, your personal refuge. You will build Yildiz Palace, a place designed not for imperial grandeur in the traditional sense, but for security and solitude. The construction is a reflection of your own mind. Unlike the grand, unified structures of European palaces like Versailles, Yildiz is not one single building. It is a vast, sprawling complex of smaller, disconnected pavilions, workshops, and residences, all set within a huge, walled park. It's a campus of paranoia. If a fire or an attack were to occur in one building, it wouldn't spread to the others. You can move between them, keeping your enemies guessing as to where you are sleeping on any given night. The whole complex is surrounded by high walls and patrolled by your most elite guards. It is a world unto itself, a gilded cage you have built with your own two hands, just like those wooden cabinets from your youth. Here, in the quiet seclusion of Yildiz, you can finally breathe. You surround yourself with the things that bring you comfort. You build a state-of-the-art carpentry workshop, far grander than the one you had as a prince. It is filled with the finest tools imported from France and Germany. The scent of sawdust is a constant, calming presence. You spend hours here meticulously crafting furniture, not for use, but for the simple, therapeutic act of creation. A quirky historical tidbit: you also built a private theater within the palace walls. You would import entire European opera companies to perform for you and your family, the only audience. Imagine a full production of Carmen, complete with orchestra and chorus, performed in a lavish private theater for an audience of maybe a dozen people. It was your own private world of controlled, predictable drama. The heart of the palace is the Meyban-i-Humayun, or the Imperial Meyban, your main residence and office. This is where you work, sometimes for 18 hours a day. The rooms are not as cavernously large as those in Topkapi. They are smaller, more intimate, and overflowing with a mixture of Ottoman and European furniture, much of which you made yourself. The style is a cluttered, comfortable Victorian aesthetic, a world away from the austere grandeur of your ancestors. There are photographs everywhere, another one of your passions. You were fascinated by photography, seeing it as a way to capture the world without having to actually go out into it. This palace becomes your bubble. You rarely leave it. For the last 30 years of your reign, you almost never venture out into the city of Istanbul. The traditional Friday prayer procession to a public mosque, a key duty for a caliph to show himself to his people, becomes a source of immense anxiety. You eventually build your own grand mosque, the Yildiz Hamidiyya Mosque, just outside the palace gates, so the journey is only a few hundred feet, entirely controllable and lined with thousands of soldiers and secret police. Historians still debate whether this self-imposed isolation made you a more effective administrator, focused and free from distraction, or if it detached you from the reality of your empire, forcing you to rely on second-hand information from sources who would only tell you what you wanted to hear. Yildiz Kales is a physical manifestation of your mind. It is compartmentalized, heavily guarded, and deeply introverted. It is a place of immense quiet industry where you pore over reports, draw up plans for railways, and manage the vast bureaucracy of your empire. But it is also a place of profound loneliness. You have successfully escaped the ghosts of Topkapi, but you have brought your fears with you. You've simply given them a new, more comfortable home. From this secluded fortress of solitude, you will attempt to rule a modernizing world. But a ruler who never leaves his castle must find other ways to see, and so you begin to build your own network of eyes and ears, a system of shadows that will stretch from these quiet wooded hills to the farthest corners of your empire. From the secluded comfort of Yildiz Palace, your new fortress of paranoia, you face a fundamental problem. How do you rule an empire you refuse to see? How can you feel the pulse of your people when you live miles away, behind high walls and a cordon of guards? Your solution is as ambitious as it is a reflection of your own deep-seated anxieties. You decide to build the most extensive and sophisticated domestic intelligence network the Ottoman Empire has ever known. If you cannot go to the world, in all its whispered, treacherous detail, must be brought to you. This isn't the formal state agency like the CIA or MI6. There's no official name for it, no headquarters. That would be too visible, too easy to infiltrate. Instead, it is a vast amorphous web of spies, informants, and agents, all reporting directly to you. This network becomes your eyes and ears, your shadow government. It is known simply as the journal chilique system, from the French word journal, for a report or diary, and it runs on paper. Thousands and thousands of reports flowing into Yildiz Palace every single day. Who are these spies? The answer is everyone, and that is the genius and the terror of the system. You recruit from every level of society. There are high-ranking pashas and government ministers secretly reporting on their colleagues. There are junior clerks in the bureaucracy listening to the gossip in their departments. There are army officers reporting on the morale and loyalty of their troops. But it goes so much deeper than that. Your agents are shopkeepers, imams, barbers, and of course the owners of coffee houses. They are the people who overhear everything. A disgruntled comment about taxes, a joke about the Sultan's beard, a conversation about a new political pamphlet from Paris. It all goes into a report. The system feeds on itself, growing larger and more complex. You offer generous rewards for useful information, which encourages more people to join the network. Soon, people are spying on their neighbors, their business rivals, their own family members. A personal grudge could be settled by writing an anonymous report accusing someone of disloyalty. The air of Istanbul grows thick with suspicion. No one knows who is an informant. A casual conversation on a ferry could lead to a knock on the door in the middle of the night. This is a mainstream historical fact, Abdul Hamid II's spy network created a palpable climate of fear that suffocated public discourse for a generation. The reports all flowed to a central office within Yildiz Palace, the Journal Katibli, or the Report Secretariat. Here, clerks sort and categorize the mountains of paper. The most interesting, most alarming, or sometimes most bizarre reports are passed on to you. And you read them. You read them all. For hours every night, you sit at your large wooden desk, the lamplight glowing on your face, and you sift through the secret life of your empire. You learn of a planned protest in Damascus, a corrupt tax official in Anatolia, a new play in Pira that contains subtly subversive themes. You are the archivist of your own empire's paranoia. This fire hose of information does not soothe your anxiety. It fuels it. For every real plot you uncover, there are 100 false alarms, 1,000 petty grievances dressed up as treason. You become obsessed with conspiracies. You see shadows in every corner. You trust your own ministers less and less because you have reports from other ministers accusing them of disloyalty. A quirky tidbit about this system is the sheer level of detail it contained. You would receive reports about the tone of voice a foreign ambassador used, or the guest list at a pasha's private dinner party. One report famously detailed the suspicious purchase of an unusually large number of lemons by a palace official, sparking a brief, frantic investigation into what nefarious plot could possibly involve so much citrus. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of this shadow network. Did it genuinely prevent coups and rebellions, keeping the empire stable for 30 years through a period of immense external pressure? Or did it simply create an echo chamber, feeding you a distorted view of reality and causing you to persecute innocent people while missing the real threats brewing just beneath the surface? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. The system made you incredibly well informed about the micro details of your empire, but it also made you a prisoner of that information. You were drowning in data, but starved of genuine wisdom. Your spies become your only connection to the world, their whispers your only reality. The network is a magnificent, terrifying machine of your own creation. It is the ultimate expression of the lessons you learned in the cafes. Trust no one. Listen to everything. You sit in your quiet study in Yildiz, the scent of wood shavings and old paper in the air, 1,000 miles and 1,000,000 secrets away from the vibrant, dangerous city below. You are the spider at the center of a vast, invisible web, and every tiny vibration, every tremor of discontent travels along the silk threads and straight to your fingertips. The constant, buzzing anxiety fueled by your shadow network needs an outlet. The thousands of reports detailing real and imagined plots leave you perpetually on edge. Sleep becomes a precious, fleeting commodity. You can't simply switch off the mind of a sultan, especially one convinced that assassins lurk behind every curtain. And so, you search for distractions, for intellectual rabbit holes deep enough to lose yourself in, to quiet the relentless hum of paranoia. You find your escape in two unlikely but perfectly complementary passions: detective fiction and carpentry. In the evenings, after hours spent poring over spy reports, you turn to another kind of report, one from a fictional address in London, 221B Baker Street. You become one of the world's earliest and most devoted fans of Sherlock Holmes. This is not just a casual interest, it is a deep and abiding obsession. You command your ambassadors in London to send you the latest stories by Arthur Conan Doyle as soon as they are published in the Strand magazine. You have them translated into Ottoman Turkish immediately, often being the very first person in the empire to read them. You even honor Conan Doyle with the Order of the Medjidi, a high civil and military decoration, much to the author's surprise. Why Holmes? Because he is everything you aspire to be. He is the ultimate master of deduction, a man who can cut through lies and confusion to find the singular, verifiable truth. While you are drowning in a sea of ambiguous information from your spies, rumors, innuendos, false accusations, Holmes is presented with a clear puzzle, and through pure, cold logic, solves it. There's a profound comfort in that. The world of Sherlock Holmes is a world that makes sense. Criminals are caught, order is restored, and reason triumphs over chaos. It is the exact opposite of the messy, unpredictable world of imperial politics you inhabit. You see yourself in Holmes. You too are a detective on a throne, trying to piece together clues from 1,000 different sources. You are trying to find the one true threat amidst a cacophony of noise. Reading about his adventures is not just entertainment. It's a form of mental training, a fantasy of control, a fringe tidbit that highlights your fandom. You were so taken with the character that when your ministers established the first modern police academy and detective force in Istanbul, you insisted they use training methods based on the principles of deduction found in the Sherlock Holmes stories. The first generation of Ottoman gumshoes were, in a way, students of the great consulting detective. But even the intellectual escape of fiction isn't always enough to calm your frayed nerves. You need something more tangible, something physical to ground you. And for that, you return to the love of your youth, your carpentry workshop. In the quiet solitude of your well-appointed atelier at Yildiz, surrounded by the clean, sharp scent of freshly cut wood, you find a different kind of peace. The world of politics is one of compromise, betrayal, and shifting allegiances. The world of woodworking is one of absolute certainty. You work with your hands, your mind focused entirely on the task before you, measuring a piece of mahogany, planing its surface until it is perfectly smooth, cutting a dovetail joint with precision so that two pieces of wood slide together with satisfying friction. This is a world of rules that don't change. Wood behaves in predictable ways. A saw cuts a straight line. Gravity holds a table to the floor. There are no hidden motives in a plank of oak. The physical exertion is a relief, and the concentration required silences the worried voices in your head. You create beautiful, intricate pieces, desks, cabinets, mother-of-pearl inlaid boxes, and even entire rooms of paneling for the palace. It's a strange and gentle irony. The absolute ruler of a vast empire finds his truest sense of control in the simple, humble act of making a chair. Historians still debate the dual nature of your personality. Were you the Red Sultan, the ruthless autocrat who suppressed dissent, or were you the thoughtful, cultured man who loved opera and intricate woodworking? The answer, of course, is that you were both. These private passions were not separate from your public role. They were essential coping mechanisms for it. The logical certainty of a home story and the physical certainty of a well-made joint were the antidotes to the poison of political life. They were how you self-soothed, how you managed the immense psychological burden of your position. In your workshop, surrounded by shavings of cedar and pine, you are not the caliph, not the emperor, not the target of 1,000 plots. You are just a man making something true with his own 2 hands, and for a few precious hours, that is enough to keep the darkness at bay. While your mind finds refuge in the logical worlds of carpentry and detective fiction, the material world of the palace continues to reflect the empire's traditions, even those you personally reject. And nowhere is this more apparent than in your ever-growing, utterly unused collection of coffee pots. This collection is not something you actively seek out. Rather, it accumulates around you, a byproduct of your station, a constant, gleaming reminder of the ritual you so deeply loathe. Let's step into the treasury rooms at Yildiz Palace, a series of secure, climate-controlled chambers where the empire's portable wealth is stored. Past the chests of gold coins and the trays of unset jewels, you would find the shelves, shelf after shelf, cabinet after cabinet, filled with coffee pots, or jezveler and ibrikler. There are, as we've mentioned, over 1,000 of them. The collection is a silent, accidental museum of decorative arts from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Each pot is a story, a diplomatic gesture, a symbol of loyalty. Many are gifts from foreign dignitaries. The German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, whom you cultivate as a key ally, sends a magnificent set of Meissen porcelain coffee pots, hand-painted with delicate flowers and gilded trim. They are exquisite, a masterpiece of European craftsmanship, and they will never have coffee in them. The Shah of Persia sends an antique silver pot, chased with scenes from the poems of Hafez, its spout curved like a scimitar. It is a nod to a shared cultural heritage, and it too will remain empty. Visiting pashas and governors from the provinces, from Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, all bring coffee pots as tribute. It is the default gift, the safest, most traditional offering to a sultan. Each one is an attempt to curry favor, to demonstrate loyalty, and each one is a small, bitter irony to you. The collection also showcases the incredible skill of Ottoman artisans. There are pots of heavy, beaten copper from the markets of Anatolia, simple and sturdy. There are elegant brass ones from Istanbul workshops, their surfaces a dizzying maze of geometric patterns. And then there are the masterpieces from the palace's own jewelers, pots made of solid silver with handles of carved ivory or jade. Some are filigreed with silver wire twisted into lace-like patterns. The most valuable are made of gold, their surfaces encrusted with rubies, emeralds, and pearls from the Gulf. A quirky fringe tidbit, some pots were designed with their own built-in charcoal burners, little marvels of engineering for serving coffee on the go, perhaps on a royal barge trip, a trip you would never take. These weren't just serving vessels, they were statements of wealth and power, pure and simple. You occasionally walk through these rooms, looking at the silent, gleaming ranks of your collection. What do you see? You don't see the beauty or the craftsmanship. You see 1,000 tiny threats, 1,000 potential chalices of poison. Each elegant spout seems to mock you. Each pot is a testament to a tradition of sociability and trust that you cannot afford. They are relics of a world you have closed yourself off from. The coffee pot is a symbol of communion, of sharing a moment with another person. Your entire life is now structured to avoid exactly that kind of spontaneous, uncontrolled interaction. So why keep them? Why allow the collection to grow? Because getting rid of them would be a statement. It would be an admission of your fear, a public acknowledgement of your paranoia. And you can never show weakness. The Sultan must appear to be in control of everything, including the traditions he despises. So the collection is maintained. Each pot is catalogued, cleaned, and polished by palace servants. They are arranged for display, their jewels glittering in the lamplight. It is a performance, just like the daily coffee-making ritual. You are curating a museum of a life you don't live. Historians still debate the symbolic meaning of this collection. Was it a hoard of treasure, pure and simple? Or was it a kind of negative collection, its value to you defined by what it was not used for? It stands as perhaps the most potent symbol of your reign, a vast, beautiful, and utterly sterile accumulation of power. The pots are all there, the ceremony is ready, the tradition is upheld, but the vital, life-giving substance is missing. They are hollow forms, magnificent but empty. Just as you feel you are upholding the hollow form of an empire whose internal substance is slowly draining away. The 1,000 pots sit in their silent rows, each one a monument to your fear, each one a polished, perfect piece of your magnificent, lonely cage. While you sit in the cloistered silence of Yildiz Palace, cataloging your fears and admiring your unused coffee pots, a very different world is buzzing just a few miles away. Down in the sprawling, crowded heart of Istanbul, in the districts of Galata, Pera, and the Old City, the very thing you dread is flourishing. The coffee houses, the kahvehaneler, are more alive than ever. They are the beating heart of the city, and their pulse is getting faster and more erratic. If your palace is a silent fortress of control, the city's coffee houses are a noisy, chaotic laboratory of dissent. Let's push open the door to one. The air inside is thick and hazy, a sweet-smelling fog of strong, dark coffee and tobacco smoke from bubbling nargileh pipes. The room is crowded and dimly lit, filled with men of all stripes. There are merchants and clerks, soldiers on leave, students from the university, and poets with ink-stained fingers. They sit on low stools or cushions, hunched over backgammon boards, the clatter of the dice a constant rhythmic background noise. A storyteller, a meda, might be in one corner, captivating a small crowd with epic tales of ancient heroes, but the real stories are being told in hushed tones at every table. Here, the information is not the carefully curated, paranoid gossip from your spy reports. This is the raw, unfiltered conversation of the empire. Men discuss the rising price of bread, the latest news from the Balkans, the new steamships in the harbor, and more, they discuss politics. They complain about the heavy-handedness of your censors and the ever-present informants. They read newspapers that have been smuggled in from Paris or Geneva, filled with radical ideas you have tried so hard to suppress: liberty, constitutionalism, nationalism. You are acutely aware of what happens in these places. Your spies are everywhere, of course. The friendly man pouring the coffee might be on your payroll. The quiet old gentleman in the corner, seemingly dozing, might be memorizing every word. You receive daily reports on the mood of the coffee houses. But you know that for every conversation your spies overhear, 100 others are missed. The coffee house has its own culture of secrecy. Patrons learn to speak in code, to use metaphors and allusions. A complaint about a bad backgammon game could be a veiled criticism of your foreign policy. This is a mainstream historical fact. The coffee houses of the late Ottoman period were crucial incubators for the political opposition that would eventually overthrow you. While your palace is a shrine to the fear of a single poisoned cup of coffee, these establishments are built on the trust of 1,000 shared cups. The act of drinking coffee together here is a bond. It creates a temporary community, a space where men can speak more freely than anywhere else. The coffee itself, the strong, unfiltered brew, is a stimulant. It sharpens the mind, loosens the tongue, and fuels long hours of debate. It is, in essence, the exact opposite of the sleepy, compliant state you wish for your subjects. It's a joke among the patrons that the best ideas are found at the bottom of a coffee cup, right next to the muddy grounds. A quirky fringe tidbit about these places is their specialization. Different coffee houses attracted different crowds. There was a coffee house for the janissaries before they were disbanded, one for the firemen, others for poets, and still others for bureaucrats. This created ideological echo chambers. If you were a young, Western-educated student filled with revolutionary zeal, you knew exactly which coffee house in the para-district to go to find like-minded individuals. It was here, in these specific coffee houses, that the seeds of the Young Turk movement were planted and watered with endless cups of strong, black coffee. You tried to control them, of course. You issued decrees limiting their hours. You increased the number of spies. You shut down the ones that become too openly seditious. But it's like trying to stamp out a fire in a dry field. For every one you close, 2 more seem to pop up. The coffee house culture is too deeply ingrained in the city's soul. It is the social glue, the public square, the internet of its day. Historians still argue whether your oppressive measures against the coffee houses were counterproductive. Did the constant surveillance and censorship actually backfire, turning simple grumbling into hardened political opposition by forcing it into the shadows and making it feel more dangerous and exciting? So, a great silent war is being waged across the city. It is a war of aromas. In your palace, the scent of wood shavings and sterile fear. In the city, the rich, intoxicating scent of coffee and conversation. You are in your silent, isolated world, reading yesterday's news from your informants, trying to understand the empire through a distorted lens. Meanwhile, the future of your empire is being debated, argued, and plotted right now over thousands of tiny, steaming cups of coffee in noisy, smoky rooms that you will never, ever enter. While you wage a silent war against the city's coffee houses, you are simultaneously waging a very different kind of campaign. A campaign to drag your ancient, sprawling empire into the modern age. This is one of the central paradoxes of your reign. You are, in many ways, a deeply conservative and traditional man, obsessed with control and fearful of new ideas. Yet you are also a fervent modernizer, a true believer in the power of technology. But your embrace of modernity is highly selective. You welcome the tools of the 19th century, but you reject its philosophies. You want the hardware of progress without any of the ideological software like liberty or democracy. Your primary motivation for modernizing is control. You see technology not as a tool for liberation, but as a tool for centralization. If you can connect the disparate parts of your vast empire, from the Balkans to Yemen, from Libya to the Caucasus, you can rule them more effectively from your quiet study in Yildiz. Your greatest project passion is the railway. You dream of steel rails stitching your domains together, allowing you to move troops, collect taxes, and receive information with unprecedented speed. The crown jewel of this effort is the Hejaz Railway. This is a project of immense symbolic and practical importance. Its stated purpose is a pious one: to build a railway from Damascus down to the holy city of Medina, making the annual Hajj pilgrimage easier and safer for Muslims. It is funded by donations from across the Islamic world, a grand project to bolster your claim as caliph. But its strategic value is not lost on you. The railway will allow you to project Ottoman power into the rebellious tribal regions of Arabia, a place your armies have always struggled to control. It's a brilliant move, wrapping a hard military objective in a soft blanket of religious devotion. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Hejaz Railway was a monumental engineering feat and a masterful piece of public relations. Your fascination extends beyond trains. You are an early and enthusiastic adopter of the telegraph. You string thousands of miles of telegraph wire across the empire, connecting provincial capitals directly to Yildiz Palace. The staccato clicking of the telegraph machine becomes the heartbeat of your administration. It allows you to bypass layers of bureaucracy, to send orders and receive intelligence almost instantaneously. Of course, the first and most important buildings connected in any new city are the governor's mansion and the headquarters of your secret police. It's your Victorian-era internet, and you use it primarily for surveillance and command. And then there's the telephone. A quirky fringe tidbit is that you had a telephone network installed within Yildiz Palace itself, one of the first in the world, long before it was common in public. But you were terrified of the device. You loved the idea of instant communication, but you hated the intimacy and spontaneity of a phone call. You couldn't see the other person's face. You couldn't gauge their loyalty. So you rarely used it yourself. You had your ministers speak to each other on it, while you had a trusted aide listen in, taking notes. You wanted the advantage of the technology without the personal risk of the conversation. You invest heavily in education, but a specific kind of education. You open new schools for civil servants, for doctors, for engineers. You need trained professionals to run your modern state. The curricula are focused on practical skills, on science, mathematics, and engineering. What is explicitly forbidden is the teaching of political science, philosophy, and liberal arts, at least the Western versions. You want to create a generation of loyal, efficient technocrats, not a generation of revolutionary thinkers. You want them to know how to build a bridge, not how to question the man who ordered the bridge built. Your modernizing impulse extends to all facets of life. You reformed the legal system, modernized the army with German advisors and Krupp artillery, and create a modern census and land registry. From your isolated palace, you are a remarkably effective micromanager, an armchair modernizer. You pore over blueprints for new schools in Jerusalem, approve the budget for a new pier in Beirut, and study reports on agricultural yields in Anatolia. Historians still argue about the ultimate legacy of your modernization. Did your top-down, control-focused approach lay the essential groundwork for the future Turkish Republic? Or did your refusal to allow political reforms alongside your technological ones create a pressure cooker situation where a newly educated and connected populace inevitably grew frustrated with your autocratic rule? You gave them the tools to communicate and travel, railways, telegraphs, a modern press, and then were surprised when they used those tools to organize against you. You thought you could import the machines of the West without importing the ideas that created them. It was a grand and ultimately doomed experiment. You were building a modern empire with ancient fears, a technological marvel run by a man who still checks under his bed for assassins every single night. Back within the perfumed, silent halls of Yildiz Palace, the modern world of railways and telegraphs feels very far away. Here, the rules are older, more subtle, and infinitely more dangerous. Life at court is a constant, quiet ballet of etiquette and intrigue. You have walled yourself off from the city, but you are still surrounded by people. Your family, your ministers, your servants, your guards. And you trust none of them. Navigating the daily life of the palace requires a level of vigilance that would exhaust an ordinary person. For you, it is simply breathing. Your days are a study in routine, because routine is controllable. You wake before dawn for the first prayer. Your breakfast is simple, predictable. Yogurt, an egg you've inspected yourself, milk from a cow you might have milked. Then the work begins. Your ministers and secretaries arrive. They do not meet with you in a grand throne room. Instead, you receive them one by one in your study, the Mabane. This is a deliberate strategy. By meeting them individually, you prevent them from forming alliances or presenting a united front. You can play them off one another, sharing a piece of information with one, a different piece with another. You are the central node through which all information must pass. The conversations are a masterclass in subtext. A minister reporting on the budget will choose his words with exquisite care. He will praise your wisdom, flatter your foresight, and then, buried deep within his report, will be the gentle suggestion of a problem. He will never criticize a policy directly. Instead, he might say, "Your Majesty's brilliant plan for the new naval school is proceeding, though the funds, as Your Majesty wisely foresaw, are proving to be a challenge to allocate." It's a game of linguistic chess. You, in turn, listen not just to the words, but to the pauses, the tone of voice, the flicker of an eye. You are constantly assessing their loyalty, their ambition, their fear. A misplaced word, a moment of perceived disrespect can have severe consequences. It might not mean a dramatic execution in the courtyard. Your methods are more refined. A pasha who displeases you might find himself suddenly appointed as the ambassador to a remote, disease-ridden corner of the empire, a promotion that is in fact a form of exile. A bureaucrat who gets too ambitious might find his department reorganized out of existence. Your displeasure is a cold, quiet force that can reshape a man's entire world overnight. Everyone in the palace knows this, and so they walk on eggshells, their smiles perfectly calibrated, their compliments endlessly flowing. Even your family is not exempt. The imperial harem at Yildiz is a world within a world, home to your wives, your children, and a vast retinue of female servants and eunuchs. While the old clichés of a sensual paradise are mostly fantasy, it was a potent center of political influence. The Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan, traditionally held immense power. But your mother had died long before you took the throne, so that position was vacant. This meant the rivalries between your different wives and their children were even more intense. Each one hoped her son would one day be sultan. You watched them all, monitoring their alliances, their petty squabbles, their requests for favors. A seemingly innocent gift from one wife to another could be a move in a decades-long power struggle. A quirky fringe tidbit of court life was the elaborate system of silent communication. In your presence and in formal settings, verbal conversation was often restricted. Servants used a form of sign language, a series of settled gestures to communicate without disturbing the imperial peace. A flick of a wrist might mean, "Bring water." A touch of the ear might mean, "The minister from the War Office has arrived." It created an eerie, hushed atmosphere where an entire staff could operate in near total silence. It suited your temperament perfectly. A silent palace is a palace where you can hear the whispers. Historians still debate the extent to which you were a master of this system or a victim of it. Were you truly the puppet master, skillfully manipulating everyone around you? Or were you so isolated, so dependent on the information fed to you by competing factions that you were effectively paralyzed by their intrigues? Perhaps you were a bit of both. You were the chief architect of this paranoid environment, and yet you were also its most prominent prisoner. You created a court where everyone spied on everyone else, and as a result, you could never be sure if the loyalty shown to you was genuine or just a performance for the other spies in the room. Every evening, you retreat to the familiar comfort of your carpentry workshop or the predictable world of a Sherlock Holmes novel. They are your only escapes from the suffocating pressure of the court. You have built a world around you that is perfectly ordered, perfectly controlled, and perfectly lonely. You have silenced every voice but your own, and in the profound quiet, the only thing you can hear clearly is the beating of your own anxious heart. For 3 decades, your system holds. The fortress of Yildiz, the shadow network of spies, the delicate and deadly ballet of court life. It all works. You successfully navigate the empire through the treacherous waters of the late 19th century, playing the great powers of Europe off one another, suppressing internal dissent, and pushing forward your own brand of autocratic modernization. The whispers in the coffee houses remain just whispers, but you can't stop the world from changing. The ideas you tried to ban, liberty, nationalism, constitutional government, are not just being discussed over coffee anymore. They are hardening into a movement. The source of this movement is a group you inadvertently created, the Young Turks. This isn't a single unified party, but a loose coalition of intellectuals, students, and disaffected army officers. Many of them were educated in the very modern schools you founded. You taught them French, sent them to study engineering in Berlin and military science in Paris. You wanted them to absorb Western technology, but they absorbed Western political thought as well. They read Voltaire and Rousseau. They saw the functioning parliaments of Europe. And they looked back at their own empire, ruled by an aging, invisible sultan from a secluded Alice, and they saw a system that was obsolete and suffocating. Their headquarters are, ironically, outside of your reach. They are based in Paris, Geneva, and Cairo, cities where they can publish their pamphlets and newspapers freely. They smuggle these seditious materials back into the empire, where they are passed from hand to hand in secret. The name Young Turks is a bit of a misnomer. Their leaders are not teenagers, but seasoned thinkers and military men. Their message is simple and powerful. The empire can only be saved by restoring the 1876 Constitution that you suspended 30 years ago. They believe that only a constitutional government can revitalize the state and hold its diverse peoples together. The tipping point comes not from the intellectuals in Paris, but from the army. Specifically, the 3rd Army Corps, stationed in Macedonia. This is a region buzzing with nationalist movements, Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbs, all seeking to break away from the empire. The Ottoman officers stationed there, led by charismatic figures like Enver Pasha and Ahmed Niazi, are fighting a losing battle. They see the empire crumbling from the outside, and they blame your rigid, centralized rule from Yildiz. They are deeply embedded in the Young Turk secret societies. They have seen the future, and it is not absolute monarchy. In the summer of 1908, the storm finally breaks. Niazi and Enver lead their troops out of the barracks and into the hills of Macedonia, issuing a proclamation. It is an open revolt. They demand that you, Sultan Abdul Hamid II, immediately restore the constitution. If you refuse, they will march on Istanbul. This is your worst nightmare come to life. It is not a palace coup led by a handful of ministers you can exile or execute. This is a full-blown military insurrection led by your own best-trained officers.
Your first instinct is to crush it. You order other army units to march against the rebels, but the rebellion spreads like wildfire. The telegraph system you built to enforce your control now works against you, spreading news of the uprising to every corner of the empire. Other army corps declare their support for the constitutionalists. The spies and informants you relied on for so long are suddenly silent. Or worse, their reports are telling you that the entire military is on the brink of abandoning you. The people in the cities, hearing the news, pour into the streets, not in protest against you, but in celebration of the rebels. The coffeehouse whispers have become a public roar. You are trapped in Yildiz Palace, a prisoner of your own creation. For days, you waver. Your advisors are in a panic. The intricate web of control you spent a lifetime weaving has dissolved in a matter of weeks. You are faced with a stark choice: unleash a bloody civil war that you will almost certainly lose, or capitulate. The detective on the throne has run out of clues. The master strategist has been outmaneuvered. On July 24, 1908, you surrender. You issue a decree from the palace, announcing that the Ottoman Constitution of 1876 is once again in effect. The Young Turk Revolution has succeeded without a single shot being fired in the capital. The city of Istanbul erupts in euphoric celebration. Crowds flood the streets waving Ottoman flags, strangers embrace, Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and Turks celebrate together, believing a new era of brotherhood and liberty has dawned. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. A quirky but poignant tidbit: your secret police, the hated symbols of your regime, are hunted down by the crowds, not to be killed, but to be forced to swear an oath to the new constitution. The hunters have become the hunted. From your window in Yildiz, you can hear the faint sound of the celebrations. You have saved your throne for now, but you are no longer the absolute monarch. You are a constitutional ruler, a shadow of your former self. The storm that began in the coffee houses has finally broken down your door. You are a sultan on parole, and you know, with the cold certainty of a man who has always expected the worst, that the story is not over yet. The months following the Young Turk Revolution are a strange and humiliating twilight. You are still the sultan,
the Caliph, living in Yildiz Palace, but the power has drained from the title. You are a figurehead, a rubber stamp for the new government run by the Committee of Union and Progress, the political party of the Young Turks. The swarm of spies has vanished. The fawning ministers have been replaced by brisk, confident men who speak to you not as a divine ruler, but as a constitutional monarch with a limited job description. It is a daily exercise in quiet degradation. You play the part you have been given. You read the speeches they write for you. You sign the legislation they pass. You even appear in public, opening the new parliament, the very institution you shuddered 30 years prior. The crowds cheer for the Constitution, not for you. You are a ghost at your own feast. You watch as the new government dismantles the structures you so carefully built. The censorship is lifted, political prisoners are freed, and a wave of giddy, chaotic freedom sweeps through the empire. For a brief moment, it seems like this new arrangement might hold. But the old world does not die so easily. Many conservative and religious elements in the city are horrified by the new secular-leaning government. They see the Young Turks as godless Francophiles who are destroying the traditions of the empire. They miss the old order, the stability and piety that you represented. This discontent simmers, and some of your old loyalists begin to plot, hoping to use this popular anger to restore your absolute power. They see you as their symbol, their silent leader. In April 1909, this simmering resentment boils over in what becomes known as the 31 March incident, due to the old Rumi calendar date. A mutiny breaks out among soldiers in Istanbul, led by lower-ranking religious students and shouting slogans in your name. We want Sharia, down with the CUP. They overthrow the CUP-led government, and for about 10 days, chaos reigns in the capital. It seems as though you are on the verge of a dramatic comeback. The counter-revolution appears to have succeeded. This is the moment of your final and fatal miscalculation. You do nothing. You remain in Yildiz, neither openly supporting the mutineers nor condemning them. You wait, as you have always done, to see which way the political winds will blow. Your inaction is seen by the Young Turks as tacit approval of the uprising. Historians still debate your true role in the 31 March incident. Were you the secret hand guiding the counter-revolution, or were you merely a passive, hopeful observer? Whatever the truth, the CUP was convinced you were behind it. Their response is swift and decisive. An action army, Haraket Ordusu, loyal to the CUP and commanded by Mahmud Shevket Pasha, assembles in Macedonia. A young officer named Mustafa Kemal, the future Ataturk, is its chief of staff. They march on Istanbul to crush the mutiny and restore the constitution. The city is retaken after a short but sharp fight. The counter-revolution collapses. The Young Turks are back in power, and this time they are finished with you. The end comes on April 27, 1909. A small delegation of 4 men arrives at Yildiz Palace. They are a deliberately inclusive group meant to represent the new multi-ethnic empire: an Albanian, an Armenian, a Laz, and a Jew. They are shown into one of the smaller reception rooms. You enter, your face a pale, impassive mask. You know why they are here. The leader of the delegation, a Jewish lawyer named Emanuel Carasso, steps forward and reads the proclamation. The parliament, invoking a fatwa from the highest religious authority, has voted to depose you. The charge is treason for your alleged role in the counter-revolution. After 33 years on the throne, your reign is over. It ends not with a bang, but with a quiet formal reading in a hushed room. There is no ceremony, no grandeur. Your vast absolute power, which you guarded with such suffocating vigilance, has now shrunk to the size of this single small room. The men ask you to gather your immediate family. You are to be exiled from the city immediately. You are allowed to take nothing with you but a few personal belongings. The last cup of coffee, metaphorically speaking, is served, but this time it is not a ritual you control. It is a bitter draught of defeat, and you are forced to drink it. They escort you out of the palace you built, past the carpentry workshop, past the silent theater, past the gardens you tended. You are put on a special train, under heavy guard. As the train pulls away from the station, you look out the window at the city you ruled for 3 decades, but barely knew. The iron rails you so proudly built to connect and control your empire are now carrying you away into oblivion. The detective on the throne has finally been outwitted, the case closed, and the verdict rendered. The train rattles through the night, carrying you away from Istanbul, away from everything you have ever known. Your destination is Thessaloniki, a vibrant, cosmopolitan port city in what is now modern-day Greece, but was then still a prized Ottoman possession. You are not thrown into a common prison. The young Turks are careful about appearances. You are a former sultan and caliph after all. You are to be held in dignified confinement. Your new home is a grand Italianate villa, owned by a wealthy Jewish banking family, the Alatinis. It is large, comfortable, and surrounded by a high wall. It is, in essence, another gilded cage, a final poignant echo of the cafés where your life began. The pace of your life slows to a crawl. The crushing weight of daily governance is gone. The endless stream of spy reports has dried up. The hushed intrigues of the court are a distant memory. Your world shrinks to the villa, its gardens, and the small retinue of family and servants who have accompanied you into exile. The days become a long, quiet, and monotonous expanse of time. You wake, you pray, you eat your simple meals. You are a man with nothing left to do but think. You spend hours reading. You devour newspapers, trying to follow the dizzying events unfolding in the empire you no longer rule. You see the young Turks, now firmly in control, struggling with the very problems you faced. They fight nationalist uprisings in the Balkans, a new war with Italy over Libya. The brotherhood of the revolution quickly splinters into ethnic and political factions. You read of their mistakes, their failures, and you must feel a grim sense of vindication. You might even allow yourself a small bitter smile. You knew it wasn't so easy. To pass the time, you return to your oldest and truest comfort. You ask for a set of carpentry tools. At first, your captors are suspicious. Could they be used as weapons? But they eventually relent. A small workshop is set up for you in one of the outbuildings of the villa. And once again you lose yourself in the familiar, honest work of your hands. You plane wood, you cut joints, you build small tables and cabinets. The clean, sharp scent of pine and the rhythmic rasp of the saw are your only companions. It is a profoundly sad and gentle image. The former ruler of one of the world's great empires, now a quiet old man making a bookshelf in a dusty shed. Your brother, who you had kept confined for 30 years, is now the Sultan, Mehmed V. He is a gentle soul, long accustomed to the quiet life of the cafés, and he serves as the perfect puppet for the young Turk government. You hear of him, this man whose life you controlled for so long, now sitting on your throne. There is a deep and quiet irony in that reversal of fortune. This quiet, contemplative life in Thessaloniki lasts for 3 years, but then the world outside intrudes once more. In 1912, the First Balkan War breaks out. A coalition of Balkan states, Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, rises up to seize the empire's remaining European territories. The Greek army advances on Thessaloniki. It becomes clear the city will fall. The young Turk government cannot risk the former caliph, falling into enemy hands. It would be a catastrophic propaganda disaster. So, in a rush, you are moved again. You are put on a German naval vessel and secretly transported back to Istanbul. But you are not returned to Yildiz, your palace of solitude. That is too grand, too symbolic. Instead, you are confined to a smaller palace, the Beylerbeyi Palace, on the Asian shore of the Bosphorus. It is another beautiful prison. From its windows, you can look across the water and see the familiar skyline of the old city, the dome of Hagia Sophia, the minarets of the Blue Mosque. You can see the silhouette of Topkapi Palace. You are home, and yet you are still an exile. Here, in your final confinement, you live out the rest of your days. You watch from your window as the empire you tried so hard to hold together collapses. You see the catastrophic entry into World War I, the brutal fighting at Gallipoli, the loss of vast territories. Everything you worked for, everything you sacrificed your peace of mind for, is turning to dust. A fringe historical tidbit. During these last years, you wrote your memoirs, a quiet, reflective account of your life and reign. You tried to explain your actions, to justify your paranoia, to defend your legacy. You were writing for history, your last and only audience. You were the detective on the throne, working on your final case, your own. The final years at Beylerbeyi Palace are a slow fade into gray. The world is engulfed in the Great War, a cataclysm that your cautious, cynical foreign policy had always sought to avoid. From your windows, you watch the German warships, your supposed allies, sailing the Bosphorus. You read the casualty lists from Gallipoli, from the Caucasus, from Palestine. The empire is bleeding to death, and you are nothing but a helpless spectator, a ghost rattling his chains in a house that is no longer his. You spend your days in quiet routine, a frail old man haunted by the echoes of a power that was once absolute. You are 75 years old, and the long, stressful years have taken their toll. In the winter of 1918, you catch a cold, which quickly deepens into pneumonia. On February 10th, with the empire just months away from its final military collapse and dissolution, you pass away. Your death is quiet, almost an afterthought in a world consumed by war. And what of your legacy? What becomes of the strange, silent collections you left behind? Your carpentry, the beautiful, intricate pieces you crafted with such love and precision, are scattered. Some remain in the palace collections, marvels of a sultan's secret hobby. Others are given away or sold. They are a testament to the private man, the artisan who found peace in the grain of wood. Your beloved Sherlock Holmes books, the first Turkish translations you commissioned, helped spawn a new genre in Ottoman literature, a lasting, if minor, cultural footprint. But what of the coffee pots? What happens to the 1,000 gleaming, empty vessels you amassed in the treasury of Yildiz Palace? After your death and the subsequent fall of the monarchy, the new Turkish Republic is formed. The palaces of the sultans are nationalized, their contents inventoried. The treasures of Yildiz, Topkapi, and Dolmabahce become the property of the state. Your strange collection is absorbed into the larger holdings of the Topkapi Palace Museum. They are no longer the Sultan's private hoard, but historical artifacts. Today, if you were to walk through the magnificent kitchens and treasury rooms of Topkapi, you can see them. Not all 1,000, of course, but a curated selection. They sit behind glass, beautifully lit, with small placards describing their origin and craftsmanship. There is the Meissen porcelain fete from the Kaiser, the silver pot from the Persian Shah, the gem-studded golden ibrick from the palace workshop. They are admired by thousands of tourists every day. People marvel at their beauty, their opulence, their exquisite detail. But they have been divorced from their story. They are just objects now, beautiful things in a museum. The profound, suffocating paranoia that defined them has gone. The silent daily ritual of fear they represented has evaporated. No one looking at these pots today can feel the cold dread you felt. No one can see them as you did. 1,000 potential weapons, 1,000 symbols of a world you could not trust. The irony is now complete. The collection, which for you was a source of private anxiety, has become a source of public wonder. Its meaning has been entirely inverted. It is a mainstream historical fact that Abdul Hamid II's reign was one of the longest and most consequential in late Ottoman history, yet he is often remembered for these strange personal quirks, the detective stories, the carpentry, and the fear of a poisoned cup.
Historians still and will always argue about you. Were you the Red Sultan, a bloody tyrant who crushed all opposition? Or were you the Great Khan, the shrewd modernizer who held the empire together for 33 years against impossible odds? Were you a paranoid reactionary or a tragic visionary figure who understood the dangers of the modern world all too well? You were, of course, all of these things. A man of deep and profound contradictions. A ruler who built railways but was afraid to leave his house. A caliph who revered tradition but couldn't partake in its most basic ritual. The sultan who feared sleep and who tried to build a fortress of order and control against the coming nightmare, only to find himself a prisoner inside it. The story of your life, like the muddy grounds at the bottom of a coffee cup, leaves behind a complex and bitter residue, one that historians are still trying to read today. And so, as our story comes to a close, the image that lingers is that of the silent collection, the 1,000 pots gleaming in the dark. They are a monument not to an empire's love of coffee, but to one man's profound fear of it. They stand as a quiet, beautiful testament to the immense, soul-crushing loneliness of absolute power, and to the Sultan who owned a world of treasures, but could never find a moment's peace within it.